You think you're mature enough to handle this lake and house? That's the first thing Clara Ridge ever said to me, loud enough for the whole room to hear, sharp enough to slice through my patience like a razor. I swear, she made it sound like I was trying to rob the place, not just live here. I was 32, sure, but the house, the lake, every scrap of paperwork was in my name, didn't matter. To her, my age might as well have been a felony. But here's the part that had knocked the wind out of her 2 weeks before that showdown. I'd already bought their HOA debt at auction fair and square, and she had no clue who she was about to pick a fight with. Wild right, I know some folks would have run. But let me ask you, if you just landed your dream house, would you back down or dig in? Let me back up a sec. First time I walked into Lakewood Heights Community Center, I thought I'd just be shaking a few hands and collecting my new resident welcome packet. 3 weeks earlier, I'd moved into 15 Lakeshore Drive, a Victorian with a wraparound porch and a private dock, the kind of place you circle in red ink when you're daydreaming about making it. As a property appraiser, I'd worked years for a shot at something like this. But the moment I pushed open those glass doors, it hit me. This wasn't going to be the homey pie and lemonade welcome I'd pictured. Clara Ridge was at the podium looking like the world's toughest librarian, every hair in her silver bun sharper than the last. She had more HOA pins on her lapel than a general's got medals. She scanned the room like she was checking for intruders, and when her eyes locked on me, everything just stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. 30 sets of eyes sized me up like I'd wandered into the wrong bar. I had my good charcoal suit on, but under that spotlight I felt like I was standing there in gym shorts and a tank top. There was Harold Green, paint-stained fingers, mid-60s, the only one who gave me a little nod. The Reynolds family, all four of them, shot glances at each other like they'd smelled a gas leak. Everybody else just waited for Clara to pounce. "Welcome to our community." "Mr. Hale," she announced, and before I could even breathe, she asked me to explain my qualifications for owning lakefront property. I'm not making this up. She literally asked a grown man to justify why he was there like I'd stolen my own deed. I'd attended my share of HOA meetings before. Usually it's welcome, grab a cookie, not prove your worth. But this was a different beast. My hands were shaking, but I did what I always do, listed my credentials: 8 years as a licensed property evaluator specializing in waterfront properties. Told him I understood the responsibility, tried to sound steady, but honestly it felt like trying to bail out a leaky rowboat with a Dixie cup. Some folks nodded, but not Clara. She just folded her arms, that look on her face like she was marking a test she already decided I'd failed. The room got so quiet you could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Then Harold piped up, tried to steer things back to regular business. "Seems well qualified. Maybe we can move on, bless him." But Clara wasn't done. She leaned in, voice dripping with sugar and vinegar, and said, "But do you really have the maturity to steward this lake and house? Properties like this demand seasoned ownership." That stung more than I care to admit. I'd busted my tail to get here, but in her mind I was still a kid who couldn't be trusted with the good scissors. I stood my ground, said my mortgage was approved like everyone else's, and the bank clearly trusted me, but in that room facts didn't matter. Clara banged the gavel and moved on like she'd settled some argument I didn't even know we were having. I sat there clutching my folder of property documents, wondering if I'd just signed up for the fight of my life. As the crowd cleared out, Harold stopped by. "Don't take it personal, son. Claire's been running things her way for a long time." The way he said it, he meant well, but it felt like a warning. Change wasn't welcome around here, and apparently I was a one-man revolution. That night I pulled into my driveway only to find a note tucked under my wiper. "Some people don't belong here no matter what the paperwork says. No signature." Yeah, that happened. I knew then that this was just getting started. Within 48 hours, Clara came at me with a vengeance, noise, complaints about classical music. I never played citations for my Toyota work truck, even though contractors parked worse all the time, and by Wednesday, I'd vanished from the community pool roster for unpaid dues. It was obvious she was going to paper me out of the neighborhood if it killed her. I started keeping records, photographing everything, building a file the size of a phone book. If she wanted a fight, she'd get one on my turf. Friday. Harold found me at the dock. He looked rough, said Clara had run unopposed for years, pushed out anyone who disagreed. He'd seen her pull this same routine on others, until they either fell in line or packed up and left. That's how she ruled fear, attrition, exhaustion. Saturday. Clara marched down my driveway and handed me a citation for landscaping. These shrubs, she said like she'd bitten into something sour, don't fit the aesthetic. They'd been there 60 years. I told her politely at first that I'd been appraising property longer than she'd been on her latest power trip, and mature azaleas add value, not the other way around. She just smiled cold as dry ice and walked off. That night, an anonymous envelope showed up in my mailbox. Inside 3 years of HOA financials, late fees, overdue payments, insurance bills, and a note that read, "She's been hiding this from everyone." Somebody wanted me to know just how bad it really was. Sitting there combing through those numbers, I realized Clara wasn't just a bully, she was sitting on a powder keg of debt. No wonder she was nervous about a property evaluator moving in. By Monday, it had turned personal. My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, started wondering aloud if I'd actually earned enough money for the place. Real subtle, right? The implications stunk to high heaven age and something uglier, all wrapped up in polite concern. But that was her mistake. Once she crossed that line, it wasn't just petty harassment. Now she was into discrimination and criminal territory stuff I actually knew how to handle. That evening, with the sun setting over the lake, I made my call. All that evidence her campaign, the HOA's debts, were going to see daylight. 3 days later, she's tried to physically block my kayak at the boat ramp, flanked by her loyal lieutenants, Margaret and Robert. Lake privileges require community standing, she said, like she was the Queen of England and I was the help. Harold, God bless him, stepped in, called out her power play right in front of the growing crowd. Even Mrs. Reynolds jumped in, asking who gave her the authority to decide who uses the lake. For the first time, Clara looked rattled. People were pulling out their phones, filming. Her support started to crack. She snapped, said the neighborhood can't allow just anyone to disrupt their way of life. That just anyone hung heavy. Everyone caught the implication. Harold stood tall. This isn't stewardship, Clara. This is harassment. And just like that, the crowd turned. Clara stepped aside, but you could tell this was war now. Word spread like wildfire. Clara scrambled, called an emergency HOA meeting, but the room was different this time. I brought my folder, sat right up front. She tried to spin things as policy enforcement, but nobody was buying it. I laid out the debts, every dime. $80,000 in maintenance, $70,000 for the community center, $50,000 in insurance and penalties. 3 weeks ago, I said this debt was auctioned publicly and I bought it legal and clear. The place went silent, then exploded in outrage. Harold demanded to know where the money had gone. Residents started demanding transparency. Clara tried her old tricks, but now she was cornered. That week, Harold found even more evidence Clara had been siphoning emergency assessments into her personal account. We built a case airtight and damning right down to the forged insurance papers. She even tried planting evidence in my mailbox, caught on my security cameras, gloves and all. The lengths she went to break-ins, forgeries, smear campaigns. She wasn't running an HOA, she was running a racket. By the time the final vote came, she had almost no support left. Even Mrs. Reynolds, whose kids had watched this circus the whole way, said, "We have to show our children that justice matters." The vote was overwhelming. Clara lost everything, her position, her reputation, her little kingdom. County prosecutors filed charges, document forgery, civil rights violations, evidence tampering, the works. Property values stabilized, the lake was open to everyone again, and for the first time in years, Lakewood Heights ran like a real community. We put in anti-discrimination policies, real oversight, and the whole place breathed easier. I stood out on my porch that first night of real freedom, the water glowing orange with the sunset, and thought about Clara's last words, about maturity and seasoned leadership. Maybe I am young, but I was exactly the right age to turn this place around, not with threats, but with facts and fairness. The lesson: never let someone tell you what you can't handle because of your age, your background, or your face. Sometimes being the outsider is the only way to make real change. So you tell me, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Ever dealt with someone like Clara? Drop your stories in the comments. Let's talk justice, and if you're feeling it, hit like, subscribe, and share. Stand your ground, friends. That's how you take back your lake.